Okay, I'm still waiting on the shocks, so that'll be the second part of this video. Let's take a look at this throttle linkage and see why it failed at that autocross event. So on the pedal assembly, this lever right here, you can see it's bent away from the pedal assembly. Let me see if I can get a shot right there where my fingertip is. That should line up with that stop, that little rubber stop there. So basically this thing's bent almost 45 degrees. So what is happening is your cable going back to your carburetors or your fuel injection goes to the lower one, and then the top ball gets the linkage that's on the pedal, on the skinny pedal. So I think the problem with my setup is I've got so much spring back there on the engine, on the butterflies, and a helper spring on the carburetor linkage. It's just too much. It's pulling this lever, and I had to do some welding right there. That pin that goes through has to be welded in there. It can't be just spinning around, or everything won't work worth a damn. So I'm going to straighten this out and add some more metal on the underside here to give it more strength, and hopefully that'll do the trick. That, and change the helper spring out, because it's just too much. It's pulling too hard. The pedal's hard to push down, frankly. All right, I got it straightened out. So really the pin needs to be at a right angle to the lever. That's what it's all about. I had some sloppy weld. I ground that down. You can see where the pin joins. And then I cut it like a 2-inch piece of bar stock. I think that's maybe 3/4, ½ inch. And then I also beveled this, so that end will lay on top of the pin and capture the pin. And then of course I'll clamp it really hard and weld, seam weld all the way down this side, and probably also where it goes into this right angle. So ultimately, when it's all said and done, let me see if I can do this with one hand. This shouldn't interfere with anything because the pin side goes into the bushings, right? And you got the beveled edge anyway. You got this support, which is inadequate. Well, the metal's fatigued, it's old, and plus I've welded on it twice already, so it just needs a little extra help. I'll get that welded up and show you what it looks like. All right, so here's what we ended up with. You can see the bar stock added. I just went along and welded along the edge. I'm using the flux core welder. That's the reason it's so ugly and splattered. I can't seem to find argon gas from my MIG, but it's definitely stronger. It doesn't want to bend like it was before. And also when you look at it from the front, it's nice. It's landing in that stop just right. So as a note, these pedals all have stops. Like on your clutch pedal there, it lands in there. Same with the brake, it lands in that stop. So that kind of shows you what your alignment should be on the pedals. So we'll put this back in and hook the throttle back up and see how it does. Hopefully it won't bend again. Hey guys, I got those front Konis installed yesterday. I did not shoot video as I was doing it. The delivery showed up late, and I wanted to get it done that evening. So the good news was I had everything prepped, and I can kind of walk you through all this and give you the major points. There's probably a ton of videos out there about changing out shocks, which this situation is a little bit unique because these are actually inserts. So the strut tube itself doesn't have to come off the car. You can take it off the car, but it's just more work. So let's get into it, and I'll walk you through it real quick. So the first thing you have to do is clamp off the brake line, the soft brake line right here that goes in between this hard line that goes to the master cylinder and this hard line that goes to the caliper itself. Clamp that off, take loose on that. It's an 11 millimeter, I think, fitting. And then once you get that hard line loose, you pull that shim or wedge or whatever it is, yank it out. It'll help if it's clean. I've already cleaned mine up. If they're rusty, they're a major pain. So get that brake line out of the way and just dangling with your clamp on it. Then you might as well buy new steering rod ends, ball joints, because you're going to trash those when you pull them. There's just no way about it, because if they're got a couple years on them, they're going to be rusty. And when you use your pickle fork to break them loose, it's going to trash the rubber. So you might as well get new ones. Now, what I did to keep my alignment, my toe, was I measured basically from the center of the bolt to the collar right here. So I got that distance there, which turned out to be like 41 millimeters. Because I wasn't sure if the replacement ball joint had the same number of threads. If you get the exact same one, you can just use your thread count right here for the exposed threads. But I went ahead and measured it because these were like aftermarket, and they were definitely slightly different in design. Also, before you start, you basically, once you break that loose and get it out of that arm, you're going to twist it. The whole ball joint is going to unscrew from this rod, hollow rod. You got to break that collar loose there, which those were pretty rusty and stubborn, so you might break those off. So have a couple of 8 millimeter bolts handy. They're probably about 36 or 40 millimeters long. So once you get all that done, then you move up top. So up top here on the strut mount, you want to mark these plates as close as you can, because you want to get that alignment. This is how you affect caster and anyway, that's your alignments settings are up here. So mark those and you'll put them right back where they were. The original doesn't have, of course, that's the yellow Koni, and that's the adjuster up there. But and you can break this loose if you want at this time before you take these off, or you can just drop it. So when you pull these cap screws, the whole strut's going to come loose, and hopefully yours will be worn out enough where it'll collapse and basically just fall through the opening here. You'll get some resistance from your torsion rods, which are meant to do that because that's your springs, right? So it'll only fall down a certain distance. The whole arm and everything will just like sag. And that'll bring this tube, this strut tube, outside of the wheel well, right? So it'll be out here. So once you get that thing out there, you can pull those top nuts. I'll show you that again. Pull the top nuts off, and that will all slide off the top of the shock insert. And your top mount will come off, and under the top mount will be a bump stop, maybe, if it hadn't already degraded. Those are the old bump stops. And then below the bump stop, you'll have a retaining collar that's on the strut tube itself. It'll look like this. Unscrew that, and that'll be pretty tight. You can use a screwdriver or a chisel or something and nest it into that and give it a whack or two with a hammer to break it loose. So once you unscrew the collar, then you'll get the strut tube out. Sorry, I meant strut shock insert. So here's the old shocks, and I mean, yeah, they should be pumping out about halfway. I mean, they're completely, there is a little bit of rebound left in these, but there's no compression at all. It's just really bad. So that'll just slide completely out of the tube. And after you clean everything up, what I did is I sprayed it down with some brake cleaner inside of the tube, and then ran a rag down in there and just cleaned up the inside of the tube. Some of those strut tubes will call for a little bit of ATF in there, supposedly to cool the shock. I didn't see any signs that had been present in these, and there may even be a hole in the bottom of the strut tube on the 914, so I wouldn't worry about that. So once you slide your new Konis in, there's some difference in hardware, and I'll try to explain that to you. The first thing is there's a different cap that comes with the Koni, and you have to use it because these caps don't seat properly over the top of the Koni insert. Once you get it in the tube, there'll be like, if you try to use that cap, there'll be like 4 or 5 threads showing, and that's no good. So the Koni cap's better. It has a different way of tightening, which is going to require, it's got 2 little holes in it. It's going to require one of these tools or something you fabricate so you can twist it down, right? So you get that tightened down. Then you're ready to put your new bump stops on. Bevel in goes down. Then you put the top mount on. Just wanted to mention before, your top mounts hopefully are in good shape because they have rubber bushings and everything. Let's look at these again. They ship some other bushings. I'm not sure what their application is for, but you can see on this top mount, it's got an hourglass shape, and then the rubber bushing, and the rubber bushing goes all the way through that hourglass shape. So it's pretty specific, and it'd be a real bear to change out. I'm not sure what these other ones they shipped are for. Maybe an application where you're custom fabricating your own top mount or whatever. Also, when you take that top mount apart, there's some locking rings and one edge is bent over. That's underneath the top nut on the shock insert. They ship new locking rings and new nuts, top mount nuts, and new washers for the bushings, which I used all that stuff. I haven't bent over this one yet, but I may or I may not. They call for 58 foot-pounds of torque on them. I just hit them with an impact wrench. I think they're good to go. So the tricky part to all this is getting that strut back up in there, because what you're going to find is those Konis are going to want to expand. And I wish I would have taken time to show you this, but it gets really kind of wonky because you're trying to compress that shock. If you had somebody to help you, you might be able to do that, because you got to compress it. Oh, I didn't discuss the dust cover, which that's pretty self-explanatory. But when you compress it, you have to compress it to get it back up in there, because what you're doing is the the torsion rod, it will be forcing that whole assembly into a position where when it's fully expanded, you can't wiggle it up in there. So what I had to do, fortunate that I have a lift, I lifted it up and used the screw jack underneath, right down under here, and forced. Well, first I put a ratchet strap on the whole strut tube after it was all reassembled and everything, and compressed it, right? And then I got my screw jack and started pushing the whole assembly, including the control arms, everything together back up in there. And once I kind of got it aligned and got the top of the strut mount up in that orifice, then I was able to let the ratchet strap go and then take the jack off, and it was nestled enough in there to where I could get these cap screws started again and pull the strut mount into its position. So if you were on jack stands, you would need to use your floor jack to do all that. I've done it before with 944s and Caymans and stuff. It's just you're fighting the spring, and you can't really compress the spring because it's actually a torsion rod. So it gets a little weird. On a regular strut with an external spring, they use your spring compressor to compress it, clear the fender, and get it back up in the mount. And then, yeah, once you get the strut back up in there, it's pretty self-explanatory. Put your plates back on there, realign, tighten those up real good, and you're done. I mean, the Konis are super sweet. I can already tell a huge difference. I tried just kind of bouncing the car, pressing down on the fender. It's a lot stiffer. Fully clockwise is soft. You go 8 turns counterclockwise, and you get, maximum compression and rebound, and you can definitely tell the difference just by kind of bouncing the fender. So, I'm really going to need them in the back too, I think, because when I bounce the back, there's a big difference. It's super soft in the back. So I think that covers it. I mean, yeah, there's a few extra pieces that, save for your stash or whatever. These bushings they ship, and then these inserts. So yeah, I guess you could make it some kind of custom, top mount or something. I'm not sure what all that's about, but my top mounts were in good shape, so I didn't need to use that stuff. So that's it. Next step for me is I got to bleed the brakes. Obviously, once you put everything back together, you're going to put those, put your new steering rod ball joints in, and I just use a impact wrench to tighten them up. They actually came with locking nuts instead of castle nuts with the cotter pin and everything, so that was a nice improvement. Then get in there and remake your brake lines. I'm going to bleed all 4 corners because they were a little soft. The brakes were soft at the autocross. Hopefully I can get that a little stiffer. And that's really all I got on my plate today. Maybe take the car for a drive if it's not raining, just kind of feel everything out. Oh, and I still need to get that softer spring for the throttle. So once I get that spring in, I'm going to wrap this segment up. And so we got a little bit more to watch before this one's done. Sorry I didn't get video taking all that apart, but one of them things. So no success finding a different spring. I went to a couple of places in town, and you got to order throttle springs specific to the piece of equipment you're putting it on, whether it's a tractor or a lawnmower or whatever. So basically I did a different anchor point on the front of that of the engine casing there. There was an available bolt hole, so I put an 8mm bolt with the locking bolt on the back side, and then something to hold it in place. other nut, and just adjusted the length of the spring. The throttle pedal doesn't feel too heavy. It's returning back to idle consistently, and I still have some adjustment left should I need it. Don't think it's going to pop off because it's pulling straighter than it was before. It was pulling it at an angle. So I'm going to call this good for now. So that's the end of this segment of the Konis and the throttle spring.